Hey, good evening. I'm Scott Weese. I'm an infectious disease veterinarian, and I focus on two main areas: emerging infectious diseases and antimicrobial resistance, and really at the human-animal interface. Today I want to talk about antimicrobial resistance, or AMR. And to do that, we have to think about antimicrobials and the miracle of antimicrobials. And that's not hyperbole. They've changed society. Right? The invention of antimicrobials is the accessibility to let modern medicine become modern medicine. Let us treat people, let us treat animals. We would not be where we are without them. It was revolutionary. But antimicrobial resistance, this inevitable response, is counter-revolutionary. If we look globally, over 1 million people die of antimicrobial resistance every year, and that's going up. And the burden is largely in young children in developing countries. If we look at Canada, economic costs, $1.4 billion, that's billion with a B, every year, and accelerating. If we look at food animals, it's been estimated that by 2050, if things are unchanged, AMR will account for production losses equivalent to the food needs of 750 million to 2 billion people. That's staggering to me, and we don't pay attention to it, right? We call it a silent pandemic because it's causing tremendous damage, but most people don't think about it. And why do we have this problem? We have this problem because we have a drug use problem. We use antimicrobials, and we have to use them sometimes, but we use too much. And we use them in situations where we have other options. And antibiotics are strange drugs. So if I'm treating an animal, or if you're taking a painkiller, right? It works or it doesn't work, and that's pretty much the end of it. If I treat an animal with an antibiotic, it works or it doesn't work, but I change that animal. I change the bacterial population in it. Like a little bit of selection for antibiotic resistance that might cause problems in that animal later on. Might spread to other animals in the household, on the farm, might spread to the owners, might spread to you, might spread to me as a vet. If it's a food animal, might get into the food and the water and the environment. So that single use in an animal has myriad downstream effects. And they're really, really small at the individual level. But when we do something over and over and over and over again, we go from a small effect to a big effect to a global health problem. And that's where we are with antibiotics. So how can we have these coexist, this use of antibiotics in animals and in people? We have this arrogant human approach that we have people and we have animals, right? The bacteria don't care. We're hosts, right? And we have to think about this globally and across species. So maybe I'll ask you a question at home. You can raise your hand by yourself if you want. What percentage of antibiotic resistance in people do you think can be attributed to antibiotic use in animals? So we'll say maybe less than 10%. Raise your hand. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want. 10 to 25%, 25 to 50, 70, or 50 to 75, 75 plus. Yeah, we have no idea, right? Not a freaking clue. We can say it's probably very low. If we look at the global human health problems with antibiotic resistance, most of them aren't coming from animals. Some are, but most of them are human-specific bugs. We're not getting drug-resistant gonorrhea from antibiotic use in animals. But there are some, right? For me, it's probably less than 5%. It's probably actually well less than 5%. But a small percentage of a major problem is still a major issue, right? So we have to keep it in balance, but we also can't use that for deflection. I was looking at this picture before. I think I've treated every species up there and more except for the bat, although we've done disease surveillance in bats. And there's a reason to say that because animals is very broad. Like I said, we have this human and animal mindset. And if I say antibiotics in animals, what do you think? What picture comes to your mind? Probably lots of chickens, cows, pigs in a barn with a lot of, and that's fair, right? That's how a lot of antibiotics are used. But that's not it, right? We have the mass-produced, conventionally housed, animals. We have outdoor reared animals. We have small-scale farming, especially in low and middle-income countries. We have backyard chickens. We have animals in rehab facilities and in zoos. We have working animals. The tractors in some areas still are working animals. We have animals used in competition, racehorses, and we have pets, the species that live in our bed and lick our face, right? We have that close interaction with. And that's the species I deal most with clinically. And the issue is, if we try to say animals, it's too broad. Something that might be effective in one species or group may not work in another, or may be counterproductive in another. Things that get done to address antibiotic use in food animals can negatively impact how we treat companion animals. And that actually is a realistic problem. So the take home is it's complex. That's my main theme of the day. And, we're not going to have a zero antibiotic use in animals target. Like, it's just not going to happen. From my standpoint, if we raise animals for food, fiber, companionship, whatever, I have an ethical duty to make sure they're healthy, to treat them if they're sick, right? And sometimes that will include antibiotics. And if we try to set the threshold too low, we run into problems, right? My mantra is use as little as possible, but use enough. And we have to balance that. And it's tough because the target really changes all the time. But why do we use antibiotics? People are animals. We use them because of health, right? Or lack of health, or often perceived lack of health or fear of lack of health, not actually because there's an issue. So what do we need to do to improve antibiotic resistance? We need to improve health. That's people, that's animals. Improving antibiotic resistance in lower middle income countries, water, sanitation, hygiene, vaccination, food access, all of these things. Same thing in animals. Nutrition, better ventilation, better management, vaccination, access to veterinary care. Improve health so we don't need to think about antibiotics. But we also need to work on the human brain. This is the biggest barrier to antibiotic stewardship because we're fearful, we're risk averse. What the hell, let's use an antibiotic, right? I don't know what's going on. I do this because we've done it. If we stopped that, we would drop our antibiotic use massively. And then we could do other things to reduce it further. Better management, better vaccination, better husbandry. We have to accept that we're going to use antibiotics in animals from my standpoint, but we don't have to accept the status quo. You can use antibiotics as a crutch. You can raise animals and raise them poorly and throw antibiotics at them and you'll do okay, right? We can have poor ventilation, poor housing, no vaccination. We can get by with antibiotics and that's not appropriate. They shouldn't be used as a crutch. They shouldn't be used to support unsustainable practices. They should be plan B, or probably not plan B, they should be plan like M, A, B, C, down to M. Like we do all these other things, and then when we still get disease, despite doing all these other things, yeah, then we use an antibiotic because I have a disease that I have to treat, and I've done everything else. So just to wrap up, the key take home I think for this today is to think about the complexity and the nuance. We too often soundbite it. You know, we try to oversimplify the problem. There's no single solution. There's no easy solution. That's why we haven't fixed it. Recognize the nuance, recognize the complexity, embrace the issue, figure out how we improve health, human and animal. Think about using antibiotics as little as possible, using them when needed, but focus on optimizing health as that impacts welfare, antibiotic resistance, and everything else down the line. Thank you.